I'm Carol Ann Riddell, and this is Science and You. The flashy and intricate techniques used in video games aren't just for fun anymore. They are changing the science of animation, opening up a whole new world of possibilities. Lisa Beth Kovetz has the story.
Animation has leapt out of the pages of our childhood and filled our screens with amazing images. When we watch animation in a movie or on TV, the images all have the appearance of being in 3 dimensions, but in fact, they're not. All these images are actually flat, 2-dimensional drawings with really cool shading. But in virtual reality, augmented reality, and video games, the action takes place in 360 degrees, and so the animation must be created in 3 dimensions. So, how do they animate in video games? Talal Chowdhury of Smack Marketing has agreed to show us the tech behind a video game he created just for fun. And, just for fun, I invited Vinod Menon, a CUNY professor specializing in light, along for the ride. In a video game, a player might, at any moment, rotate his point of view to a new angle, and therefore every object must be visible in 3 dimensions all the time, and so every object, animated or still, starts out as a 3-dimensional model. The model is given an internal skeleton, and then, by manipulating the skeleton, the character moves. It's a long, detailed process, and it all starts with the model.
3D modeling is more of an art form, I think. People can make crude models really quickly, but the challenge is, hey, how do you make those models look realistic?
There are lots of prefabricated models all over the internet, but to acquire interesting new models, Chowdhury has combined emerging 3D tech in a unique and interesting way.
As soon as I found out about 3D scanning, as soon as I found out that, hey, you can scan people, it's like, hey, I could do a lot with this. As soon as I got my hands on one of these scanners, I immediately started scanning all my family and friends and coworkers.
The scanner Chowdhury is using is one of several new pieces of technology that capture images in 3 dimensions.
As a physicist working in lasers, what do you think is happening there optically?
So I think the 3D scanner actually has 2 cameras. One is the camera on the iPad itself. The other is the camera that it has on the structure sensor, which is an infrared camera. So in addition to the infrared camera, it also has a structured light projector, which is probably an infrared laser or an infrared LED, which projects a grid onto the free space. And any distortions in this grid is what is recorded by the infrared camera, which then translates that to depth information. Combining this depth information with the visible camera's data, you get the entire 3D picture.
Talal used this technology to scan friends and coworkers to be used in a special experimental project.
This project is called Smackdown.
In Smackdown, Chowdhury rigged his friends' scans with digital skeletons and then gave these new characters some basic computer-coded fighting moves. So let's break down how he did that.
If I can scan someone in a A pose or a T pose, I can use a lot of software and tools and algorithms to automatically rig their skeleton. And then once I have that, I can use that in a game engine like Unity and just play with these characters.
I asked Chowdhury if he would put us in the video game, and he said, no problem. It only took a couple of minutes for him to scan Professor Menon and me in standard A poses. Then, he rigged our skeletons by indicating the location of a few specific joints. Once the skeleton was in place, the models could be animated at will.
We're entering a really, really interesting world.
But what if you're not into video games? Is this 3D animation technology going to spill out into the rest of the media landscape?
Is 3D animation the marketing of the future?
I think so. The web e-com experience is going to keep changing. If we can make that experience any better, like, hey, why not? We have to challenge ourselves to, make the web, the internet, a better place, a more interesting place.
This has been Lisa Beth Kovetz for Science and You.
Do you remember that scene in Star Wars where Luke Skywalker gets a robotic arm to replace the arm he lost in a lightsaber battle? Pretty far-fetched, right? Actually, not. Science fiction is now becoming reality. Dr. Max Gomez tells us about a remarkable new robotic arm developed for veterans.
And if I break this egg, I won't be invited back. It is a remarkable demonstration of what a combination of modern robotics, prosthetics, and computer controls can accomplish. Amputee vets Fred Downs and Artie McCauley each lost an arm decades ago. But at a recent news conference at the VA's Harbor Healthcare System's Manhattan campus, Fred and Artie showed off the capabilities of their new bionic prosthesis called the Luke Arm. Fred and Artie can pick things up, feed themselves, even open pill bottles, something neither man thought they'd ever be able to do again.
You always think that you're going to be an amputee for life. This gives you more of a sense of being reunited with an arm.
Can you imagine not having an arm for all those years and then being able to do something with the left hand again? Oh,
an emotional moment.
Very emotional moment. It certainly was. It still is, actually.
The battery-powered motors in the arm are controlled by movements of the feet, moving toes up or heels up, rolling feet to the left or right. Each movement directs the arm to do something different.
So I have 4 different grips. You may have 6. You have 6. And rotate the wrist like that. I have a bump switch right here that I'm using to change modes. So
I'll catch up to you.
You got up to me now? Okay. Now let's go wrist forward. Ready? There you go. All right, wrist up. Okay, hand to the right. Rotate the right.
Those foot actions are sensed by motion detectors called accelerometers, essentially the same as those in smartphones. Simple in concept, but getting it right takes a lot of practice.
With the technology, you have to be concentrating. You can't be talking to your mother-in-law when she's angry. You've got to be able to concentrate on what you're doing. There you go.
Almost as amazing as the range of motions possible is that the user can actually tell how hard he's squeezing something.
There are sensors in the finger that will give the user positive sensory feedback to tell them if they're actively gripping something and kind of give them guidance as to how much pressure they're putting on the device.
The Luke Arm is now commercially available through the VA system for vets and also to non-vets from Mobius, the manufacturer. It's a remarkable achievement facilitated by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency.
We went from basically zero all the way through a prototype, through the FDA, to the commercialized arm in just a handful of years.
Now comes the hard part, paying for the arm. Non-vets can order one, and the VA says it will try to get one for vets who need it. But there are thousands of amputee vets, and the manufacturer has yet to put a price tag on the Luke Arm. And even though the cost will likely go down as more arms are made, it's still going to be very expensive. For Science and You, I'm Dr. Max Gomez.
And joining us now, our very own Dr. Max Gomez. So glad you're here, Dr. Max.
Thank you. It's fun to be here.
That was a remarkable story. It looks so incredibly sophisticated, this device. It's just what it can do.
It is life-changing for these veterans. As one of them said, I never thought I'd be reunited with my arm again. They'd been amputees for several decades. And we underestimate, those of us who have both of our limbs, underestimate what a big difference, even just the ability to pick something up and move things around, hold a pill bottle, peel a banana.
Because those small movements are very intricate.
They're intricate, they're hard to control, and there are devices and assistive devices and things that help with that. But to be able to do that on your own again is really life-changing. It's a huge increase in quality of life.
So you had mentioned in the story that the technology is in some ways similar to a smartphone. How is that?
It has, as you noticed, that when he rolled his feet,
yeah.
There are little things called accelerometers. You know, when you hold up your phone to your ear, it goes dark so that you're not, using up batteries, or it can tell when you've got it in portrait mode versus landscape mode. Yes. Those are little devices called accelerometers that can tell the position. That's what's in those little gadgets that he had attached to his feet. So he can tell, all right, I'm rolling my foot to the right, I'm rolling it to the left, I'm toes down, toes up, that sort of a thing. And those are the motions that then get translated into the motions of the arm.
How much more sophisticated is this than what used to be available, Max?
Geez, for arms, it was pretty primitive. There were some ways, I mean, we all remember, maybe some of us all remember really basic hooks and claws and things that could kind of grasp.
It's sort of very limited types of movements.
Very, very limited. Those prostheses have been around for a long time. They've gotten a little more sophisticated in being able to grab and hold things, but this is orders of magnitude more sophisticated, and the ability to do such a wider range of motions. Flexing the elbows, moving well, they had the shoulder joint was in place, but flexing the elbow, moving, rotating the wrist, gripping things, being able to pick up an egg or a grape without crushing it.
Determining pressure. Yeah, I was really struck by that.
Because that makes a big difference. You know, it's a difference between you're trying to unscrew the top off a bottle of jelly or a jar of jam or something, and picking up a raw egg or a grape or something. It's a big difference.
Given this, I mean, I don't know, what do you think the future could look like, Max?
It is almost scary. It is truly Star Wars-y kinds of things. There are right now projects that are going on where they've implanted chips and electrode arrays in the brain. The signals come out, sometimes via a plug or different ways, and they're a little crude still at the moment. Those brain signals go to a computer that translate what the person is thinking, and the brain waves control an arm.
Wow. So as opposed to the movement,
as opposed to
actually directing it with your thoughts?
You're actually directing it with your thoughts. That's going on right now. That's already been done. There are a handful of patients that have had these implanted that are being able to grip things, move their hands just by thinking it.
Wow, the future is here.
As I said, it's almost scary, but it's really, really exciting.
Really exciting. All right, great stuff. Thanks so much for coming in, Dr. Max. We want you back soon.
I'll be back.
Okay.
Okay.
Despite all the headlines about global warming, we don't always consider how even the small things we do as human beings impact our environment. For example, something as simple as the salt poured on our winter roads. Ari Goldberg has that story.
Salt in our waters associated with the use on roads is a really big and growing problem in the United States and indeed any place around the world where it snows. To get a sense of the scope of the problem, the amount of salt that's applied to our roadways is enormous. In a cold place and where it snows several times per year, it is thousands and thousands of pounds of salt are applied to the road. So even something that is as benign as salt, when applied in huge quantities, can become a problem.
America began experimenting with using salt to de-ice our roadways in the late 1930s. And according to a recently published study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, the first study on such a massive continent-wide scale, this yearly runoff has contributed to rising salinity levels in North American freshwater bodies. Peter Grothman is an environmental scientist at CUNY and at the Carey Institute in upstate New York. His colleagues there co-authored this study.
We have seen many changes in our freshwater ecosystem. Species die off, new species come in. Sometimes the function of the system seems to improve, sometimes the function of the system appears to decline. And attributing specific causes to those changes is very difficult. That's one of the great challenges, why environmental science is so exciting, is because we observe complex changes in the environment and then we have to figure out what's causing them. Salt is certainly contributing to some of the changes that we see.
The easiest consequence to understand is that for plants and animals designed to live in fresh water, salt water can end up killing them. But there are clear impacts on our own health as well.
So we rely on our water bodies, the groundwater, streams, and lakes to cleanse the environment. They play an important role in keeping water clean from nutrients and from other pollutants. And the presence of salt in the water has adverse effects on this purification or environmental purification function of our lakes and streams and groundwater. So there's concerns about, in particular, about heavy metals, which are also widespread in the environment. And as we add salt to the environment, it affects the ability of ecosystems to mobilize metals.
Think of how people talk about trees being able to clean carbon dioxide from the air. Our lakes and rivers provide these kinds of ecosystem services too. And in short, if you mess with their chemistry, you mess with their ability to clean up harmful chemicals for us.
Perhaps most relevantly, is it has adverse effects on human health. So salt is linked to high blood pressure and a series of other human health questions. And it's particularly disturbing to watch this as salt accumulates in our reservoirs, that we get concerned that either we're going to have to spend much more on water treatment or we're going to be drinking salty water and with negative effects on human health. And the costs, small effects on human health, have enormous costs for society.
Thankfully, New York City itself has proven to be one of the better protected reservoir systems.
Our water comes from reservoirs upstate, and they're very keen on avoiding sources of pollutant in the land around the reservoirs. So over the last 20 years or so, the city, in partnership with the upstate communities, has worked very, very hard to keep pollutants out of these reservoirs. So all the sewage treatment plants have been upgraded, septic systems have been upgraded, farm operations have been improved. I do have to say a word about the people who manage our highways, who have made tremendous advances in the way they use salt. So we do use thousands of pounds of salt per foot of road. It's a lot of salt per winter, but it's much less than it used to be. So our salt trucks now have, they have computers on them and temperature sensors, and they apply this salt much more efficiently and much more effectively than they used to.
If there's at least a bit of good news, it doesn't seem levels are high enough to be causing immediate catastrophe. However, there's not exactly a fix in sight.
So the question is, I guess let's talk a little about what's the solution to this. So people just talk about salt alternatives. So for instance, we could use sand instead of salt. And in many places they mix salt with sand, or they sand the roads instead of the salt. But you know, if you use enough sand, it's just as big a problem as salt, because it's going to wash off the road, it's going to clog up all kinds of things, it's going to cover up the organisms in the stream. So sand is not the answer. There are some salt alternatives that are perhaps more benign than salt, but I think in any case, if we use a lot of it, there's going to be some type of effect. I know I've been doing work on this topic for about 20 years. I know it's a huge environmental problem. If I'm driving in a snowstorm, I want to know, where is the salt truck? And so I know a lot about this, but I think societal demand for safe roads is very high. So maybe we'll make improvements maybe we'll find something more benign. We'll certainly continue to use it more efficiently and effectively. Maybe our cars and our tires will get better, or maybe we'll just all stay home when it snows more.
From the shores of our waterways here on the Hudson River, I'm Ari Goldberg for Science and You.
Anyone who's ever had a pet knows the connection between people and animals can be incredibly special. Andrew Falzon introduces us to an organization using horses to help military heroes heal emotional scars.
Many veterans transitioning back to civilian life find that it can be challenging and end up seeking some sort of therapy to help make that adjustment. Today, we met a bunch of therapists who are helping veterans do just that, and it might surprise you to learn that they have 4 legs and not 2.
I was a platoon leader in the Army in Vietnam, 1969 to 1970.
And today, Ray Scott is a proud military combat veteran who takes pride in having served his country, but still grapples with the emotions from that time.
It wasn't pleasant. It's something you try to forget, but it haunts you every day. Sights, sounds, noises, smells, could be anything.
As part of the healing process, Ray was open to non-traditional therapy options that might help. He found it at Gallup NYC. While Gallup offers all New Yorkers the opportunity to ride and interact with horses in an urban environment, the group's specialty is catering to those with special needs. In addition to working with veterans, Gallup also offers riding lessons for a variety of special needs groups, including those at all levels of the autism spectrum and at-risk teens. Susie Marquardt is the instructor who has led the Veterans Program for the past 6 years. Horses are prey animals and very sensitive to what's around them. She says horses are able to read people and their emotions, and that's where the therapeutic bond begins.
The veterans can understand that feeling because they need to be, especially in combat, aware in the same way. So when they interact with the horse, the horse will mirror their emotions and their behavior, let them know that, you're making me feel uncomfortable. So the veteran will say, well, okay, how can I moderate myself so the horse feels more comfortable with me? And that's like the main thing that happens.
Was a candidate for the Air Force Ranger, got some injuries, lost an eye.
As a result of those injuries, Miguel Davis decided to accept an honorable discharge from the Air Force in 1971. The Panamanian immigrant says working with horses helped reconnect him with his past and in turn helped create a better future.
Well, one, I grew up with horses, and I didn't realize the therapeutic side of it, you know, until way later when I wasn't really interested in talking about my military experience, and maybe that did me in, because my way was to, I wasn't even in the military as far as, you know, that I closed the door.
And once that door reopened for Davis, it provided a benefit that couldn't be measured on a test or provided by a medication.
It's like a whole nother world opens up to you that is available, that you can access. And so that I'm not thinking about disability, I'm thinking about creating ability. You know, it's like, what are, I'm not dead. You know? You know?
Researchers are still investigating how horse therapy actually affects the brain. At Columbia University, scientists are using functional MRI on riders before and after equine therapy sessions. The fMRI allows them to detect changes in the brain. Researchers at Michigan State University suspect the biophysical connection between the horse and the rider helps reconnect pathways in the brain that were previously damaged. As a result, therapy sessions are tailored to the rider's needs. Younger riders at Gallup get on a horse during their first lesson, but that's not the case for the veterans.
With the veterans, we actually start out the first 3 lessons, they don't get on the horse. We work with what we call groundwork, so working with the horse, leading them around, working with them at liberty in a round pen, and trying to develop this relationship of trust by the horse and understanding what's the horse's mentality, because that helps them kind of understand what's going on in their heads and hearts.
Many times their anger, their angst, impatience, deep breaths, shallow breaths that turn into longer breaths, much deeper. It's total relaxation.
There's no experience necessary to ride at Gallup NYC, only a willingness to listen and learn from a 1,500-pound animal, an experience that has helped veterans like Ray take back control of their lives.
I had ridden before, but in those days, the horse took me. Now I take the horse.
If you think the services offered by Gallup NYC might help you or someone you know, they have locations across the 5 boroughs. Log on to their website at gallupnyc.org for more information. I'm Andrew Falzon for Science and You.
If your passions intersect around music and technology, we've got someone you need to meet. Andy Cabot, who uses the harmony between them as a means to create new sounds.
There are so many different sound-producing natural phenomena out there in the world, and we humans have been extremely resourceful in harnessing so many of them to make musical instruments. But there are ones that we haven't used because it takes too much energy or too much precision, or it's too complex. So there's an opportunity in there to create instruments that express in new ways, that sound differently. What I usually say is that I'm a sculptor working with sound and with robotics, just because that's the easiest way to throw sort of a big umbrella over all of it. Mostly I come up with ideas that I'm excited about, and then I build them. The project for Stella Artois was very interesting. They came to me and they asked me to invent and design 4 instruments, a quartet of instruments using their sort of iconic chalice, their Stella glass that you're used to seeing. And I agreed to it before I even got to listen to the glasses, but I got very lucky. It turns out they sound great, actually. They make really nice glass bells.
Bowing strings on a violin, that works pretty well. They're kind of made for each other. Bowing Stella chalices, a little bit trickier. It's a good thing we brought Matt here, who has such patience for it.
Bowing is a very human thing. There's a lot of unconscious feedback about the amount of pressure you apply, the angle you do it at, how slow or fast you draw the bow. And if you get it wrong, the note jumps up an octave or it goes all screechy or doesn't sound at all. So making a mechanical thing that's going to do this is going to be really difficult.
Precision and detail are really important in here because everything that you do here shows up in the sound.
At different times over the years, I have different people in the studio working with me, and the projects that get executed are very much a result of their abilities as well as mine. So fundamentally, it's good to know a lot about software. It's good to know, actually, I would say a bunch about math and physics, more than anything. To know about music, and then if you can do math, then you can turn most problems into math, which makes things amazingly, like, it gives you great power over problems that you're trying to solve if you can sort of quantify them. And understanding physics is pretty great because it applies to so many physical things that we're building. There's, you know, physical waves traveling in the air. A lot of people come in with music backgrounds, and that's incredibly useful, especially if it runs fairly deeply and they're a composer and they know a whole lot about how we understand sound, how we make meaning out of what we hear. How we make meaning with sound, to me that's always infinitely interesting because I don't know the answer. It just sort of keeps going and going. I think it's a really fundamental part of we human beings in it. If I was going to do some sort of hypotheses about like us humans and our history and where all this comes from, the fact that we speak is probably a big part of this. And what I'm doing right now is I'm taking that incredibly deeply interconnected web of things and I'm sort of serializing it into a bunch of words and turning those into a bunch of sounds. I have a specialized organ right here that like turns it into a specific, turns those things, and they're going into your ears. You have specialized organs here that are very much about this copying. And I'm copying these things in my head into your head. And we do it all with sound.
And that is our show for today. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Carol Ann Riddell. We'll see you next time on Science and You when Dr. Max Gomez and I bring you a special half hour on climate change.